The mirror frame sat propped against the dumpster in the August heat, its gilded edges cracked and peeling, the glass long gone, leaving only an ornate wooden skeleton that nobody wanted. Lisa Chen's hands trembled as she lifted it, ignoring the apartment manager's impatient sigh behind her. "You have 15 minutes to clear out completely, Mrs. Chen. After that, I'm changing the locks." Lisa didn't respond. She couldn't. Her throat had closed around words that felt too heavy to speak. The frame weighed almost nothing in her hands, but the weight of everything else. The eviction notice, the medical bills stacked like accusations on the kitchen counter, her daughter Maya's college acceptance letter she couldn't afford to make real. That weight threatened to crush her entirely. Maya appeared in the doorway of their soon-to-be former apartment, her 10-year-old face trying so hard to be brave. "Mom, why are you keeping Aunt Teresa's broken mirror? We don't have room in the car." Lisa looked at the frame, really looked at it for the first time since her aunt had died 3 months ago. The ornate carving depicted roses intertwined with vines, the craftsmanship exquisite despite the damage. Something about it pulled at her, a whisper of memory from childhood visits to Aunt Teresa's cluttered brownstone in Brooklyn. "Your aunt loved this piece. She told me once it was the only thing she ever truly owned. But the glass is gone, and it's all cracked. We need to pack important stuff. This is important." Lisa couldn't explain why. She just knew, deep in the hollow place where grief and exhaustion lived, that leaving this frame behind would be wrong. Some instinct older than logic insisted she protect this last connection to the woman who had raised her when her own mother couldn't. 20 minutes later, everything they owned sat crammed into a 2003 Honda Civic with 214,000 miles and a check engine light that had been glowing for 6 months. Garbage bags filled with clothes, boxes of dishes and books, Maya's stuffed animals and school projects, and wedged carefully into the back seat, wrapped in an old blanket, Aunt Teresa's broken mirror frame. The apartment manager stood on the curb with his clipboard, watching them with the cold satisfaction of someone who had seen this scene dozens of times before. Single mothers, poor families, people who had made the mistake of getting sick or losing jobs or simply existing at the wrong economic level. They all ended the same way eventually, possessions in trash bags, driving away from addresses that would never be home again. "Where are we going, Mom?" Lisa started the engine, which coughed twice before catching. She had $847 in her checking account. No job, because the hospital had let her go after she'd missed too many shifts caring for Aunt Teresa during those final weeks. No family left except Maya, and nowhere to go that made any sense. "I don't know, baby, but we'll figure out." The lie tasted like metal in her mouth. She drove aimlessly at first, heading north out of Philadelphia with no destination in mind. The August sun beat down mercilessly, and the Civic's air conditioning had died somewhere around 180,000 miles. Sweat soaked through her shirt as she navigated traffic with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Maya fell asleep against the window, exhausted from helping pack and try not to cry. Lisa glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror and felt fury kindle beneath the fear. This wasn't fair. Maya was brilliant, kind, deserving of so much more than sleeping in a car because her mother couldn't keep them housed. The hospital bills had destroyed them. Not Maya's hospital bills, but Aunt Teresa's. Lisa had signed as guarantor when her aunt needed emergency surgery, never imagining the insurance would deny half the claims, never understanding that being a good person, a responsible family member, would result in $67,000 in medical debt she had no way to pay. The collection agencies called constantly. The eviction had come after she'd missed 3 months of rent, trying to negotiate payment plans that the hospital refused to consider. And now here they were, everything they owned stuffed into a dying car, driving toward nothing. Her phone buzzed with a text from her former landlord's lawyer. Legal proceedings would continue. Judgments would be entered. Wages would be garnished as soon as she found employment again. The system had teeth, and it didn't care that she had done everything right. Worked 2 jobs, paid her taxes, showed up for every shift, volunteered at Maya's school, tried so hard to be enough. It had never been enough. By nightfall, she had driven 3 hours north without conscious decision, following highways that led away from Philadelphia towards smaller towns she barely remembered visiting as a child. Her gas gauge showed a quarter tank. Her stomach had been empty since breakfast. Maya would need dinner soon, but every dollar spent on food meant fewer dollars for gas, for parking, for whatever came next. She pulled into a rest stop somewhere in rural Pennsylvania, parked in the far corner where the overhead lights didn't quite reach. Other vehicles occupied similar positions. RVs and trucks, people who lived on the road by choice or necessity. She wondered which category she belonged to now. Maya woke when the engine stopped, groggy and disoriented. "Where are we?" "A rest stop. We're going to sleep here tonight." Her daughter's face crumpled, finally releasing the tears she'd been holding back all day. "I don't want to sleep in the car. I want to go home." Lisa climbed into the back seat and pulled Maya against her chest, feeling her daughter's small body shake with sobs. "I know, baby. I know. I'm so sorry. Why can't we afford an apartment? You work so hard." The question had no good answer. How could she explain to a 10-year-old that working hard meant nothing when medical debt consumed everything? That the system was designed to punish people for getting sick, for being poor, for existing without the safety net that money provided? Sometimes life is unfair in ways we can't control. But I promise we'll get through this. Another lie, or maybe a prayer. Lisa wasn't sure which anymore. They ate vending machine sandwiches and shared a bottle of water. Maya did her summer math homework by phone light, while Lisa searched online for homeless shelters, women's resources, anything that might offer temporary safety. The options all required waiting lists or proof of residency or sobriety certifications, or a dozen other requirements that seemed designed to exclude the people who needed help most desperately. As Maya finally drifted back to sleep, Lisa's eyes landed on the mirror frame in the back seat. Even in darkness, the carved roses seemed to catch ambient light, giving the damaged wood an almost ethereal quality. She remembered Aunt Teresa's hands running over those carvings with something like reverence. This belonged to someone important once, her aunt had said during one of Lisa's childhood visits. Someone who understood that beauty matters even when no one's watching. Lisa had been maybe 7 or 8, too young to understand why her aunt lived alone in a brownstone filled with other people's discarded treasures. Too young to recognize the coded sadness in Teresa's voice when she talked about the past. Now, sitting in a parking lot with everything she owned in garbage bags, Lisa wondered what Teresa would think of how her niece had turned out. Would she be disappointed? Angry that Lisa had let medical bills destroy their stability? Or would she understand, the way she'd understood so many things Lisa hadn't appreciated until it was too late to say thank you? Sleep came in fragments, broken by truck engines and the fear that someone would knock on the window and tell them they couldn't stay here either. When pale dawn light filtered through the windshield, Lisa felt older than her 34 years, worn down by exhaustion that had nothing to do with one sleepless night. Maya woke stiff and uncomfortable, her neck bent at an angle that made her wince. "Mom, I really need to use the bathroom." They walked into the rest stop building together, Lisa acutely aware of how they must look, wrinkled clothes, unwashed hair, the particular exhaustion that marked people living in vehicles. Other travelers gave them wide berth, that instinctive distance people maintain from visible poverty. In the bathroom, Lisa splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection. Hollow eyes, skin gone gray from stress, the kind of appearance that screamed desperation to anyone paying attention. She wondered when exactly she had become invisible, one of those people others look through rather than at. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from debt collectors and one new voicemail from a number she didn't recognize. She listened to it while Maya brushed her teeth with bottled water. "Ms. Chen, this is Robert Morrison from Morrison & Associates Legal Services. I'm calling regarding the estate of Teresa Chen. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss inheritance matters pertaining to you. It's urgent that we speak." Lisa played the message 3 times, trying to parse meaning from words that seemed designed to confuse. Inheritance? Aunt Teresa had died owing money to half a dozen creditors. The brownstone had been sold to pay her debts, and Lisa had received exactly nothing except a few pieces of furniture the estate sale company had deemed worthless. including the mirror frame. She called the number back, expecting voicemail or a scam. Instead, a professional receptionist answered on the second ring and transferred her immediately to Robert Morrison himself. "Ms. Chen, thank you for returning my call. I apologize for the delay in reaching you. There were complications in locating your current contact information. I've been evicted. We're living in my car." Her voice came out harsher than intended, defensive against whatever new burden this lawyer was about to add. "I understand. I'm very sorry to hear that. The reason I'm calling is that Teresa Chen's estate has been under review for the past 3 months. During that process, we discovered several discrepancies in her financial records that require your attention as her sole living heir. There's nothing to inherit. Everything was sold to pay her debts." Morrison paused, and Lisa could hear papers shuffling. That's what we initially believed as well. However, Teresa maintained a safety deposit box at a bank in Brooklyn under a maiden name we didn't know about until recently. The box contains documents that suggest Ms. Chen's circumstances were significantly different than her lifestyle indicated. Lisa's hand tightened on the phone. "What does that mean?" "It means you need to come to our office in Brooklyn as soon as possible. There are items that cannot be discussed over the phone and decisions that need to be made quickly. Can you be here tomorrow?" "I don't have money for gas to get to Brooklyn." Another pause, longer this time. "Ms. Chen, I'm going to be direct with you. The contents of that safety deposit box suggest your aunt may have been a very wealthy woman who chose to live as though she had nothing. I need you to come identify certain items and sign documents that will allow us to proceed with estate settlement. I'll wire $500 to your account today to cover travel expenses. Please, this is genuinely urgent." The lawyer's words made no sense. Teresa had worked as a seamstress in Brooklyn's garment district for 40 years, retired with barely enough to survive, lived in the same rent-controlled brownstone until developers finally forced her out. There was no secret wealth, no hidden fortune, just an old woman who collected other people's broken things and died owing money she couldn't pay. But Lisa had $847 in her account and nowhere to go. Brooklyn was at least a destination. "We'll be there tomorrow." She hung up and stared at Maya, who had been listening with wide eyes. "Are we going to Brooklyn?" "I guess we are, baby." The $500 appeared in her account within 2 hours, confirmation number arriving via text. Lisa filled the gas tank for the first time in months, bought real food from a grocery store, let Maya pick out a small treat without calculating the cost down to pennies. For just a few hours, they could pretend that money wasn't the constant equation determining every decision. They drove to Brooklyn through late summer humidity that made the Civic's broken air conditioning feel like punishment. Traffic crawled through New Jersey, every delay eating into the time Lisa had calculated for arrival. Maya did more homework in the passenger seat, solving math problems that seemed impossibly complex for a 10-year-old, but that she worked through with focused determination. "Where did you learn to do math like that?" Maya shrugged without looking up. "Ms. Rodriguez says I'm gifted. She thinks I should apply for the advanced program at the magnet school." The magnet school required transportation Lisa couldn't provide, supplies she couldn't afford, a stable address for enrollment paperwork. All the things that separated gifted from merely smart. Resources, stability, the kind of foundation that poverty actively destroyed. "You're gifted, baby. Don't let anyone tell you different." "Even me? When I couldn't afford your acceptance letter." The question hit like a physical blow. Maya had been accepted to a prestigious summer program for advanced math students. Full scholarship for tuition, but Lisa would have needed to cover housing and transportation and meals. The program director had called twice, increasingly confused about why a parent would turn down such an opportunity for a clearly exceptional student. Lisa hadn't known how to explain that exceptional didn't matter when you couldn't afford to eat. "Especially not me. I'm just trying to keep us alive right now. That doesn't mean I don't see how incredible you are." Morrison and Associates occupied a renovated brownstone in Park Slope, the kind of neighborhood where lawyers could afford brass nameplates and original hardwood floors. Lisa parked 2 blocks away in the only spot she could find that didn't require payment, then walked with Maya through streets she remembered from childhood visits to Aunt Teresa. The neighborhood had changed, gentrified beyond recognition. The bodegas where Teresa had bought groceries were now artisanal coffee shops. The laundromat where they'd spent Sunday afternoons had become a boutique selling $800 handbags. Brooklyn had transformed into a place for people with money, and Lisa felt acutely aware of how much she didn't belong here anymore. Robert Morrison met them in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a small garden. He was younger than his voice had suggested, maybe 40, with kind eyes and the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who cared more about competence than image. "Ms. Chen, thank you for coming. And you must be Maya." He shook both their hands formally, then gestured to chairs arranged around a polished wooden table. A banker's box sat in the center, its contents hidden but somehow radiating significance. "I'll be direct because I know your situation is difficult. 3 months ago, when Teresa Chen died, her estate appeared straightforward. One property sold for debt settlement, modest personal effects distributed to charity, case closed. But 2 weeks ago, a bank contacted us about a safety deposit box rented under the name Teresa Morrison. Morrison was her maiden name," Lisa confirmed. "She never married." Robert nodded. "Exactly, which is why it took us so long to make the connection. The box had been rented since 1963, paid annually through automatic withdrawal from an account we knew nothing about. When we opened it, we found documents that completely change our understanding of who your aunt was." He opened the banker's box and began removing items with careful precision. First, a stack of photographs showing a young Teresa, maybe 25, stunningly beautiful, standing beside men in expensive suits at what looked like high society events. Gallery openings, charity galas, museum fundraisers. "Your aunt moved in very elevated circles in the 1960s and 70s, Robert explained. "She worked as a seamstress, yes, but for a very exclusive clientele. Wealthy families, collectors, people who valued discretion and craftsmanship." Lisa studied the photographs, trying to reconcile the elegant woman in vintage designer clothes with the aunt she remembered. Simple dresses, calloused hands, a brownstone filled with other people's cast-offs. Robert continued removing documents. Bank statements showing accounts with six-figure balances. Property deeds for buildings Teresa had owned and sold decades ago. And most significantly, a handwritten letter dated 6 months before Teresa's death, addressed to Lisa. "She wanted you to have this. The letter's contents are private, but I can tell you that it references something Teresa believed she had hidden for you to find when the time was right. She was very specific about not making things easy, about requiring you to look closely at what she'd left behind." Lisa's hands shook as she accepted the envelope. The paper felt expensive, heavy stock with Teresa's distinctive handwriting across the front. "For Lisa, when she's ready to see." Inside, her aunt's words reached across death with devastating clarity. "My dearest Lisa, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've finally found your way to Mr. Morrison's office. I'm sorry it took so long, and I'm sorry for the difficulties that surely brought you here. I know my death probably caused financial hardship. Medical bills have a way of destroying the people who care most. I lived simply by choice, not necessity. For 60 years, I've been hiding in plain sight, protecting something valuable from people who would have taken it if they'd known it existed. I collected broken things, furniture, frames, objects others discarded, because broken things are invisible to those who only see value in perfection. Among everything I left you, there is something of extraordinary worth. Not immediately obvious, not flashy, but real and valuable beyond what you can currently imagine. You need to look closely, look beneath the surface, look at what others would overlook. Trust your instincts. Trust what you know about me. I love beautiful things, but I valued survival more. That tension defined my entire life, and understanding it is the key to understanding what I've left you. The mirror frame, Lisa. Pay attention to the mirror frame. With all my love across whatever distance separates us now." Aunt Teresa Lisa read the letter 3 times while Robert Morrison waited patiently. Maya had moved to the window, giving her mother privacy, but Lisa could feel her daughter's curiosity like a physical presence. "The mirror frame is in my car. I almost left it behind when we were evicted. Robert leaned forward with sudden intensity. Can you describe it? Ornate wood carving, roses and vines, gilded edges mostly flaked off. The glass is missing. Apparently it broke years ago, and Aunt Teresa never replaced it. It's just a frame now, maybe 4 feet tall, 2 feet wide. Beautiful craftsmanship, but obviously damaged. And you brought it with you to Brooklyn? It's literally the only thing I insisted on keeping. Everything else could have stayed behind, but something made me protect that frame. Robert's expression shifted into something Lisa couldn't quite identify. Not excitement exactly, but focused intensity, suggesting he understood something she didn't. Miss Chen, I need to see that frame immediately. Teresa left notes in her safety deposit box about construction techniques used to hide valuable items inside furniture and frames. She was very specific about the rose motif being significant. 20 minutes later, they stood in the parking garage, Lisa unwrapping the blanket that protected the frame. In the fluorescent lighting, the damage looked even more severe. Cracks spiderwebbing through the gilded wood, entire sections of carving broken or missing, the whole thing appearing ready to disintegrate if handled roughly. Robert examined it with the careful attention of someone who knew what to look for. He ran his fingers along the inner edges where the glass would have been mounted, testing for irregularities. He studied the backing, which appeared to be simple cardboard attached with old nails. May I remove the backing? Lisa nodded, and Robert used a small toolkit from his car to carefully pry out the nails. They came free easily, suggesting someone had removed and replaced them before. The cardboard peeled away in sections, revealing another layer beneath. Not cardboard, but something that looked like leather, darkened with age. Robert's hands began to shake. Miss Chen, I think we need to do this somewhere more secure. My office has better lighting. And privacy. Can we take this upstairs? They carried the frame carefully through the building's service entrance, avoiding the main lobby where other clients might see. In Robert's private office, with the door locked and blinds closed, he continued the delicate excavation. The leather proved to be a protective envelope, stitched along all 4 sides with the same meticulous craftsmanship Teresa had brought to her seamstress work. Robert used a seam ripper to open it carefully, preserving the integrity of each stitch. Inside, between layers of silk cloth, something caught the light. Robert lifted the silk away with hands that had gone completely steady, and Lisa's world tilted sideways. Diamonds. Not jewelry, but loose stones, dozens of them, each individually wrapped in tissue paper and arranged in careful rows. Colors Lisa had never seen in diamonds: deep blue, vivid pink, canary yellow, and among them, several stones of extraordinary size that defied her understanding of what diamonds could be. Robert picked up one of the larger stones with tweezers, examining it under a jeweler's loupe he produced from his desk drawer. When he set it down, his face had gone pale. Miss Chen, I'm not a gemologist, but I've handled enough estate jewelry to recognize exceptional quality. These stones. He gestured helplessly at the array of diamonds covering his desk. These are museum-grade gems. Fancy colors, exceptional clarity, several over 10 carats. Your aunt hid a fortune in diamonds inside a broken mirror frame. Lisa couldn't process the words. They bounced off the surface of her understanding without penetrating. Diamonds. Fortune. Aunt Teresa. How much? Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Robert examined several more stones before answering. I need proper appraisal, but conservative estimate based on size and apparent quality? 200 million. Maybe more if some of these are truly flawless and the colors are natural rather than treated. The number had no relationship to Lisa's reality. 200 million existed in a different universe than $847 in her checking account. Eviction notices, sleeping in a car. Maya had been watching silently from the corner, but now she spoke up with the practical clarity children sometimes accessed. Mom, are we rich now? The question hung in the air like smoke. Were they? Or was this another trap, another system designed to take from people like them? Robert seemed to read her thoughts. Ms. Chen, these diamonds legally belong to you as Teresa's sole heir. But we need to proceed very carefully. Gems like these attract attention from dealers, collectors, criminals, and tax authorities. We need security, proper appraisal, legal protection, and a strategy for liquidation that doesn't flood the market or make you a target. Lisa stared at the diamonds scattered across expensive wood, each stone representing more money than she'd earned in years of working 2 jobs. Her aunt had lived in poverty while sitting on this fortune, had died owing money she could have paid 1,000 times over, had watched Lisa struggle without ever revealing this existed. Why? Why would she hide this? Why not use it? Robert handed her another envelope from the safety deposit box, this one sealed with wax bearing Teresa's initial. That's explained here. She was very specific about her reasons and about what she wanted you to understand before claiming this inheritance. Lisa broke the seal with hands that had started shaking again. Inside, more of Teresa's distinctive handwriting, but these pages felt heavier somehow, weighted with history and secrets her aunt had carried alone. Lisa, the diamonds you found belonged to my employer in 1963, Mrs. Eleanor Ashford, one of the wealthiest women in New York. I worked as her personal seamstress, creating custom garments for society events. She trusted me absolutely, which proved to be her mistake. Eleanor was murdered in her home on October 15, 1963. The killer took cash and several pieces of jewelry, making it appear to be a robbery. But I knew the truth. Her nephew, Richard Ashford, needed money to cover gambling debts. I had overheard arguments, seen threatening letters, understood the desperation that drives people to evil. The night before her murder, Eleanor called me to her room. She was afraid, though she wouldn't say why. She asked me to take her most valuable diamonds and hide them somewhere safe, somewhere Richard would never think to look. She said if anything happened to her, I should wait 20 years and then use the stones to build a better life. I took them, and the next night, she died exactly as she feared. I went to the police with what I knew about Richard. They dismissed me. A seamstress accusing a wealthy man of murder? Impossible. Richard inherited everything, sold Eleanor's estate, and disappeared into a life of luxury built on his aunt's blood. I kept the diamonds hidden, waiting for justice that never came. 20 years passed, then 30, then 40. I couldn't sell them without questions I couldn't answer. Couldn't use them without drawing attention that might lead back to Eleanor's death. So I lived simply, worked honestly, and waited for the right time to pass this burden to someone I trusted. That person is you, Lisa. These diamonds are worth a fortune, but they come with responsibility. Eleanor Ashford's murder was never solved. Richard died in 2005, but his children and grandchildren still live on wealth stolen from a woman they helped erase from history. I want you to use this money to build the life you deserve. But I also want you to consider telling Eleanor's story, clearing her name, ensuring she's remembered as more than a footnote in someone else's inheritance. The choice is yours. I won't haunt you if you simply take the money and run. But I hope you'll consider that some debts transcend death, and some stories deserve to be told even when telling them is difficult. All my love. Aunt Teresa. Lisa sat in Robert Morrison's office for 3 hours while he made phone calls to people whose titles she didn't understand. Security consultants, estate attorneys, gemologists with credentials from institutions she'd never heard of. Each conversation reinforced that her life had fundamentally changed, though the reality felt as insubstantial as smoke. Maya fell asleep on the leather couch in the corner, exhausted from the emotional whiplash of the past 48 hours. Lisa watched her daughter's chest rise and fall with the deep rhythm of childhood sleep and felt terror more acute than anything poverty had produced. When you had nothing, no one noticed you. No one wanted what you didn't possess. But wealth made you visible in dangerous ways, and Lisa had spent enough years surviving on the margins to understand that visibility could be fatal. Robert finally hung up from his last call and turned to face her with an expression mixing excitement and concern. I've arranged for a gemologist to come tomorrow morning. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation, she's one of the top experts in fancy-colored diamonds in North America. She'll need several days for proper evaluation, but she can give us preliminary assessment within hours. And then what? Robert hesitated, choosing words carefully. Then we develop a security plan and begin the process of liquidating assets in ways that don't crash the market or paint a target on your back. But Lisa, I need to be honest about something. The Ashford family still exists, and they're powerful. If word gets out that you possess diamonds Eleanor owned, diamonds that should have been part of her estate in 1963, they'll claim ownership. But Aunt Teresa said Eleanor gave them to her the night before she died. That makes them a gift, right? Proving that 60 years later, without documentation, will be nearly impossible. The Ashfords have lawyers who specialize in estate recovery. They'll argue theft, fraud, illegal possession. They'll tie you up in litigation for years while the diamonds sit in escrow, generating nothing but legal bills. The trap closed around Lisa's chest, squeezing air from her lungs. Of course it couldn't be simple. Of course the universe wouldn't allow someone like her to just receive a fortune without strings attached, without some new form of suffering built into the gift. So what do I do? Robert leaned forward, elbows on his desk, voice dropping to something almost conspiratorial. We authenticate the diamonds quietly. We establish their value. We document everything Teresa left in that safety deposit box. And then we make a choice. Sell quickly and quietly to private buyers who won't ask questions, or go public with Eleanor's story and fight for legal ownership in court. Which would you recommend? The lawyer's smile held no humor. Honestly, I tell you to take the money and run. Sell the diamonds through discreet channels. Accept maybe 70 cents on the dollar to avoid scrutiny and disappear into a comfortable life somewhere far from Brooklyn. But your aunt clearly wanted Eleanor's story told. And there's something in Teresa's notes about justice mattering more than money. If you choose that path, you'll be choosing the hard road. Lawsuits, media attention, threats from people with resources to make your life extremely difficult. Lisa looked at Maya, sleeping peacefully, unaware that her mother was being asked to choose between safety and honor. The easy choice was obvious. Take whatever money she could get quickly, move somewhere no one knew them, give Maya the stable childhood she deserved. The hard choice meant fighting, risking everything, possibly ending up with nothing if the Ashfords' lawyers proved more effective than justice. I need time to think. You have until Dr. Chen arrives tomorrow at 9. After that, the authentication process begins, and there's no putting this particular genie back in the bottle. Robert arranged for them to stay at a modest hotel in Queens, paying with the firm's credit card and registering under a false name. Security theater, probably, but it made Lisa feel slightly safer than sleeping in the Civic. The room had 2 beds, a working air conditioner, and a deadbolt that engaged with satisfying solidity. Maya woke when they entered the room, groggy and confused. Where are we? A hotel. We're safe here tonight. Are we really rich, Mom? Or was I dreaming that part? Lisa sat on the edge of Maya's bed, brushing hair back from her daughter's forehead the way she had since Maya was an infant. I don't know yet, baby. It's complicated. Everything's always complicated. Maya's voice carried a weariness that belonged to someone much older. Can't something just be good without also being bad? The question had no answer Lisa could give. She held her daughter until Maya drifted back to sleep, then moved to the window and stared out at Queens sprawling beneath a hazy summer sky. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message made her blood run cold. We know you have Eleanor Ashford's diamonds. Return them to the family and avoid legal consequences. This is your only warning. Lisa's hands shook as she screenshot the message and forwarded it to Robert Morrison. His response came within minutes. Don't respond. Don't engage. I'm contacting security. Stay in the hotel. Don't go anywhere alone. She checked the deadbolt 3 times before allowing herself to lie down on the second bed, fully clothed, with her phone clutched in one hand. Sleep came in fragments, haunted by dreams of men breaking through the door, Maya screaming, diamonds scattering across the floor like deadly rain. Dr. Sarah Chen arrived at Robert Morrison's office at exactly 9 the next morning, carrying equipment that looked more appropriate for a laboratory than a law office. She was 50-ish Chinese-American, with the focused intensity of someone who had spent decades studying things most people never noticed. Robert had arranged for a security guard to stand outside his office door. Another consultant had installed temporary cameras. The diamonds lay spread across black velvet on the conference table, each stone labeled with a number corresponding to Teresa's meticulous documentation. Dr. Chen moved among them with practiced efficiency, examining each diamond under multiple light sources, taking measurements, making notes in a leather journal. Her face revealed nothing as she worked, professional neutrality masking whatever thoughts occupied her mind. After 3 hours, she set down her loupe and looked at Lisa with an expression mixing respect and something close to awe. "Ms. Chen, your aunt possessed one of the most significant private collections of fancy color diamonds I've encountered outside museum settings. These stones represent decades of careful acquisition, each piece selected for exceptional quality and rarity." She gestured to a vivid blue diamond the size of a thumbnail. "This is a natural fancy vivid blue, approximately 15.7 carats, vs. 1 clarity. Comparable stones have sold at auction for over $30 million. And you have 3 blues in this collection, plus 2 pinks that are equally extraordinary." Lisa's legs went weak. She sat down heavily, trying to process numbers that had no relationship to her understanding of money. Dr. Chen continued with clinical precision. "The yellow diamonds are type IIA, which is exceptionally rare. The reds, you have 2 small reds, are the rarest color of all. I would need more time for complete evaluation, but my preliminary assessment is that this collection's total value exceeds $270 million. The number hung in the air like something physical. $270 million. Enough money to solve every problem Lisa had ever faced, enough to give Maya any future she could imagine, enough to never be afraid again." But Dr. Chen wasn't finished. "However, there's a significant complication. I recognize several of these stones from historical records. The Ashford collection was famous in gemological circles in the 1950s and 60s. Eleanor Ashford owned some of the finest fancy colored diamonds in private hands. When she died, those diamonds were assumed to have been stolen and lost forever. So the Ashfords will claim these belong to them? They'll absolutely claim that. And legally, they have a strong case. Eleanor's estate was settled in 1963. Any assets that should have been part of that estate but were not included would technically still belong to the estate's beneficiaries." Robert interjected, "Unless we can prove Eleanor gifted them to Teresa before her death. The letter Teresa left establishes that Eleanor asked her to hide the diamonds, which could be interpreted as a transfer of ownership." Dr. Chen looked skeptical. "You'd need evidence that would satisfy a judge. Teresa's letter is self-serving testimony. The Ashfords will argue she stole them and created a convenient story to justify possession." Lisa's phone buzzed with another text. This one included a photograph. Maya's school, recognizable despite being from last year before they'd moved. The message read, "Your daughter is precious. It would be tragic if something happened to her because of your greed." She showed the phone to Robert with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "They're threatening Maya." The lawyer's face went hard. "That's a criminal threat. I'm calling the police." The NYPD detective who responded to Robert's call was a woman in her 40s named Patricia Rodriguez. She examined Lisa's phone, took statements, documented everything with professional thoroughness. But her assessment offered little comfort. "Threats sent from burner phones are almost impossible to trace. We'll investigate, file reports, but realistically, the people making these threats know how to avoid leaving evidence. My advice is to take this seriously. Hire private security, vary your routines, consider relocating temporarily." "I can't afford private security." Lisa's laugh came out bitter. "Or I couldn't until yesterday. I'm still processing that I might have money now." Detective Rodriguez's expression softened. "I understand this is overwhelming. But if you're in possession of assets worth hundreds of millions, you need protection immediately. People have died for a lot less." After the detective left, Robert made more phone calls. Within 2 hours, he had arranged for a security firm to provide 24-hour protection. 2 former NYPD officers would shadow Lisa and Maya in shifts, and their hotel room would be upgraded to a secured floor with controlled access. The cost was staggering, $15,000 a week. Robert paid it from the firm's account, explaining he would bill it against the estate once everything was settled. Lisa signed forms she barely read, too exhausted to process the legal language that bound her to decisions she didn't fully understand. Maya took the news of bodyguards with the resilience children sometimes demonstrated in crisis. So we're like important people now, the kind who need protecting? We're people who have something valuable that other people want, Lisa explained. That makes us targets. I liked it better when we were poor and nobody noticed us. Me too, baby. Me too. The media discovered the story within 48 hours. Someone, Lisa suspected the Ashford family's lawyers, leaked information to a New York Times reporter who specialized in estate disputes. The article appeared on page 3 of the business section, carefully worded to avoid libel, but devastating in its implications. Seamstress's niece claims Ashford Diamonds' questions of ownership have emerged surrounding a collection of valuable diamonds allegedly discovered by Lisa Chen, 34, niece of deceased Brooklyn seamstress Teresa Chen. The gems, reportedly worth over $200 million, may have belonged to the late Eleanor Ashford, murdered in her Manhattan home in 1963. The Ashford family's attorney, Marcus Whitfield, stated, "These diamonds were stolen from Eleanor Ashford's estate 60 years ago. The family intends to recover its rightful property through all available legal channels." Ms. Chen's claims of gifting are unsupported by evidence and appear to be a transparent attempt to profit from theft. Lisa Chen could not be reached for comment. The article included photographs, Eleanor Ashford in her prime, dripping with jewels at society events. Teresa's brownstone as it had looked before being sold, and a grainy photo of Lisa from her hospital ID badge, looking exhausted and poor, the kind of woman readers would instinctively distrust claiming ownership of anything valuable. The phone calls began immediately, reporters demanding interviews, lawyers offering representation, collectors expressing interest in private sales, and mixed among them, threats. Anonymous voices promising violence if she didn't return what wasn't hers, describing in detail what they would do to her daughter if she continued fighting. Robert held an emergency meeting with a crisis management firm. The consultant, a woman named Jennifer Park, had the polished competence of someone who specialized in wealthy people's problems. "You're losing the narrative," she explained, gesturing to coverage spreading across social media. "Right now, you're the villain. Poor woman trying to steal from a murdered socialite's family. We need to reframe this immediately." How? Tell Eleanor's story. Explain why Teresa hid the diamonds, what she knew about the murder, why she felt protecting these gems was protecting Eleanor's legacy. Make this about justice for a woman who died violently, not about you getting rich. "But that means going public with everything," Lisa protested. "It means painting a target on our backs." Jennifer's smile held no warmth. "That target already exists. The Ashfords leaked the story specifically to turn public opinion against you before you could control the narrative. Now you fight back or you surrender. Those are your options." Lisa looked at Robert, searching for guidance. The lawyer's expression suggested he agreed with Jennifer's assessment. "If you're going to fight, fight smart. Use the media instead of letting them use you. Tell your aunt's story, Eleanor's story, and yes, your story. Single mother, medical debt, eviction, finding hope in a broken mirror frame. That's compelling. That builds sympathy. It feels like exploitation," Lisa said quietly. "Using Eleanor's death to make people feel sorry for me. It's not exploitation if you're genuinely seeking justice." Robert's voice carried conviction. Teresa's letter made clear she wanted Eleanor remembered, wanted the truth about her murder exposed. You'd be honoring her wishes while protecting your inheritance. Maya had been listening from the corner, and now she spoke with the clarity children sometimes achieved when adults were drowning in complexity. Great Aunt Teresa kept this secret for 60 years because she was scared. Maybe we don't have to be scared anymore. Maybe we can be brave for her. The interview aired on 60 Minutes 3 weeks later. Lisa sat in a studio chair wearing clothes Jennifer had selected. Professional but not expensive, relatable but not pitiful. The interviewer, a veteran journalist named David Morrison, had built his career on letting people tell their stories without artificial drama. The segment began with Eleanor Ashford's murder archival footage from 1963 showing police carrying a body from her townhouse. Then Teresa's story, her career as a seamstress, the trust Eleanor placed in her, the diamonds hidden the night before the murder. Lisa explained carefully, every word vetted by lawyers, how Teresa had gone to police with suspicions about Richard Ashford, how she'd been dismissed, how she'd spent 60 years protecting gems she believed Eleanor wanted kept safe from the nephew who had killed her. David leaned forward when Lisa reached the present day. Your aunt died owing money. You were evicted, living in your car. Why didn't she tell you about the diamonds while she was alive? Lisa's answer came from genuine emotion rather than calculation. I think she was afraid. Afraid of what people would do if they knew these existed. Afraid of being accused of theft when she'd only been trying to honor Eleanor's wishes. She protected these diamonds for 60 years, and she protected me by keeping me ignorant until I was strong enough to fight for them. The Ashford family issued an immediate response through their attorney. Marcus Whitfield appeared on morning news shows, his silver hair and expensive suit projecting authority and old money legitimacy. This is a fantasy constructed to justify theft. Eleanor Ashford never gifted anything to her seamstress. These diamonds were stolen when she was murdered, and they belong to her legal heirs. We will recover them through the courts. But public opinion was shifting. Social media exploded with debate, hashtags trending in Lisa's favor. Hashtag Justice for Eleanor competed with hashtag Return the Diamonds. Think pieces appeared analyzing class dynamics, questioning why wealthy families deserve inheritances from murders committed decades ago. A historian specializing in New York society in the 1960s came forward with research suggesting Richard Ashford had indeed been in serious financial trouble in 1963. Gambling debts, failed business ventures, desperate need for cash. The police investigation into Eleanor's murder had been cursory at best, focused on the robbery theory without seriously considering family members. Eleanor's former maid, now 93 and living in a nursing home, gave a deposition describing Richard's frequent arguments with his aunt, his demands for money, Eleanor's fear of him in the weeks before her death. The testimony was compelling enough that a journalist reopened the investigation into Eleanor's murder, filing Freedom of Information requests for police records. And through it all, the threats escalated. Someone broke into Lisa's hotel room while she and Maya were out with their bodyguards. Nothing was stolen, but a message was spray-painted across the bathroom mirror. Thieves die. A car followed them for 3 days, different vehicles, but always the same pattern, staying just close enough to be noticed, making their surveillance obvious and threatening. Maya's new school received a call claiming there was a bomb in her classroom. The evacuation disrupted an entire day of learning and terrified 200 children. Police found nothing, but the message was clear. Nowhere was safe. Robert hired additional security, upgraded their protection to the level usually reserved for celebrities and politicians. The cost approached $50,000 a week, burning through Lisa's modest savings and requiring Robert to advance more money against the eventual settlement. "You're bleeding me dry," Lisa told him during a particularly difficult week. "If this goes on much longer, I won't be able to afford to keep fighting." The lawyer's expression was grim. The Ashfords are counting on that. They have unlimited resources, and their strategy is to make continuing this fight more expensive than surrendering. They're waging a war of attrition. How do I win that war? You outlast them. You make the cost of fighting you higher than the cost of settling. And you pray that public opinion matters more than money. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A librarian in Manhattan reached out to Robert's office with information about Eleanor Ashford's personal papers, which had been donated to the New York Public Library in 1964, a year after her death. Among those papers, the librarian had found Eleanor's personal diary from 1963. The entries stopped 2 days before her murder, but they painted a damning picture of her final months. Robert read selected passages aloud in his office, Lisa and Maya listening with growing horror. October 10th, 1963. Richard came again, demanding money. I refused. He said I would regret it, that family should help family, that I owed him after all he'd done. What has he done except squander every opportunity given to him? October 12th, 1963. I'm frightened. Richard's threats feel genuine now. I've asked Teresa to take my most valuable pieces for safekeeping. She protested, saying it wasn't her place, but I insisted. I trust her more than anyone in my family. October 13th, 1963. Final entry. If anything happens to me, look to Richard. He's desperate enough to do something terrible, and I no longer believe family bonds will protect me. Robert set down the diary with careful precision. This is evidence of Eleanor's state of mind immediately before her death. It supports Teresa's account that Eleanor asked her to hide the diamonds, and it directly implicates Richard Ashford in her murder. Can we use this in court? We could try. The Ashfords will argue it's hearsay, unreliable, that Eleanor was elderly and possibly confused. But combined with the maid's testimony and the financial records showing Richard's desperation, it builds a compelling circumstantial case. The legal battle officially began when the Ashford family filed suit in New York State Supreme Court, seeking recovery of stolen property valued at $270 million. Lisa countersued, claiming ownership through valid gifting and arguing that the Ashfords had no standing because Richard Ashford had murdered Eleanor to inherit property he wasn't entitled to. The discovery process consumed months. Lawyers deposed everyone with any connection to Eleanor or Teresa. Gemologists examined the diamonds repeatedly, documenting their characteristics, matching them to historical records of Eleanor's collection, establishing provenance that proved these were indeed the missing Ashford gems. Lisa's life became an endless series of legal meetings, strategy sessions, media appearances carefully choreographed to maintain public sympathy. Jennifer Park managed her image with the precision of a military campaign, controlling every photograph, every interview, every public statement. Maya struggled with the disruption. She'd started at a new school under a false name, with bodyguards waiting in the parking lot every afternoon. Her classmates knew something was different about her, creating a social distance that left Maya isolated and lonely. "Mom, when does this end?" The question came one night after Lisa helped her with homework, both of them exhausted from another day of manufactured normalcy. "I don't know, baby. Soon, I hope. What if we lose? What if the judge says the diamonds belong to the Ashfords? Then we go back to how things were before. We survive." But Maya's expression suggested she understood that going back was impossible. They'd glimpsed a different life, tasted possibility, imagined futures that poverty had previously made unthinkable. Returning to that scarcity would feel like punishment now, like losing something they'd earned rather than simply failing to receive a gift. The trial began on a gray March morning, snow falling through bare tree branches outside the courthouse. Media trucks lined the street, reporters jockeying for position, photographers capturing Lisa's arrival with bodyguards flanking her on both sides. The Ashford family entered through a separate entrance. 3 generations of wealth and privilege, all impeccably dressed, all projecting the absolute certainty that justice would favor them because it always had. Marcus Whitfield, their lead attorney, was everything Robert Morrison was not. Expensive suit, silver tongue, the kind of presence that commanded courtrooms through sheer force of cultivated authority. His opening statement painted Lisa as an opportunistic thief exploiting an old woman's fabricated story. Eleanor Ashford was murdered in 1963. Her diamonds were stolen that night and disappeared. 60 years later, the niece of Eleanor's seamstress conveniently discovers these gems hidden in a mirror frame, accompanied by a self-serving letter claiming they were a gift. This is transparent fraud, and the court should see through it immediately. Robert's opening was quieter, more deliberate, focusing on Eleanor's own words from her diary and the systematic efforts Richard Ashford had made to cover up his crime. Eleanor Ashford was afraid of her nephew. She documented that fear in her own writing. She took steps to protect her most valuable possessions from someone she believed meant her harm. And 2 days after writing that if anything happened to her, the court should look to Richard, She was murdered in a robbery that was never properly investigated because Richard stood to inherit everything. The trial stretched across 3 weeks. Witnesses paraded through the courtroom, each adding pieces to contradictory narratives. The elderly maid testified about Richard's threats, his gambling debts, Eleanor's fear. A forensic accountant showed that Richard's finances improved dramatically after Eleanor's death, debt disappearing as inheritance flowed in. The Ashfords countered with character witnesses describing Richard as loving and devoted. They presented an alternative theory, that Teresa herself had stolen the diamonds during the chaos following Eleanor's murder, then created an elaborate story to justify possession when her niece discovered them. Dr. Sarah Chen testified about the diamonds' characteristics, their value, the impossibility of acquiring such gems through normal channels. Her assessment that these were definitely Eleanor's missing collection was unshakable under cross-examination. Lisa took the stand on day 16. Marcus Whitfield approached her with the predatory confidence of someone who specialized in destroying sympathetic witnesses. Ms. Chen, you were evicted for non-payment of rent just before discovering these diamonds, correct? Yes. You were living in your car with your 10-year-old daughter? Yes. You had maximal motivation to fabricate any story that would allow you to keep hundreds of millions in diamonds? I didn't fabricate anything. My aunt left me the truth. A truth conveniently impossible to verify because she's dead. The truth supported by Eleanor's own diary, by witness testimony, by evidence your family spent 60 years ignoring because acknowledging it would reveal Richard Ashford was a murderer. Marcus's smile was thin and sharp. Richard Ashford died in 2005. He can't defend himself against these accusations. Neither can Eleanor. She's been dead for 60 years. But her words survive, and they tell us exactly what happened. The cross-examination continued for 3 hours, Marcus probing for inconsistencies, attacking Lisa's credibility, painting her as motivated by greed. But Lisa's warehouse-hardened backbone held. She'd survived too much to be intimidated by expensive suits and practiced contempt. When Robert called Maya as a witness, Marcus objected strenuously. The judge overruled him, allowing the 10-year-old to take the stand. Maya's testimony was simple and devastating. She described finding the mirror frame in the trash, watching her mother insist on keeping it despite having no room in their car. She explained how her mother had worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford rent, how they'd slept in parking lots, how the diamonds had been discovered accidentally rather than through some calculated scheme. Your Honor, Maya concluded, my mom didn't know those diamonds existed until the lawyer called. She kept that frame because she loved her aunt, not because she knew it was valuable. That's the truth. The courtroom fell silent. Even Marcus Whitfield seemed momentarily uncertain how to attack a child's sincere belief in her mother's integrity. The judge took 2 weeks to deliberate before issuing her ruling. When Lisa returned to the courtroom to hear the decision, her hands shook so badly that Robert had to help her stand. Judge Margaret Chen, no relation to Lisa or Dr. Sarah Chen, was a woman in her 60s with a reputation for careful analysis and impatience with legal theatrics. Her ruling read like a narrative rather than a legal document, walking through every piece of evidence before reaching her conclusion. This court has reviewed extensive evidence regarding Eleanor Ashford's death, the circumstances surrounding the diamond's disappearance, and the competing claims of ownership. While absolute certainty is impossible 60 years after the relevant events, the preponderance of evidence suggests the following. Eleanor Ashford feared her nephew Richard. Her diary documents this fear explicitly. She took steps to protect her most valuable possessions, entrusting them to Teresa Morrison, the only person she believed she could trust absolutely. 2 days later, she was murdered in circumstances that were never adequately investigated. Richard Ashford had motive, means, and opportunity. His financial desperation is documented. His sudden wealth following Eleanor's death is suspicious. The cursory police investigation focused on robbery without seriously considering family members, a failure that allowed a likely murderer to profit from his crime. Teresa Morrison kept the diamonds hidden for 60 years, living in poverty while sitting on a fortune, because she understood that revealing their existence would lead to exactly this type of legal battle. Her decision to pass them to her niece was made with clear understanding of the burden she was creating. The court finds that Eleanor Ashford transferred ownership of the diamonds to Teresa Morrison before her death, intending that Teresa protect them from Richard Ashford. That transfer was valid. Teresa's subsequent possession was legal, and Lisa Chen, as Teresa's sole heir, is the rightful owner of the disputed diamonds. The Ashford family's claim is denied. The courtroom erupted. The Ashfords' lawyers immediately announced they would appeal. Media representatives rushed for exits, racing to break the news. Robert gripped Lisa's shoulder with genuine emotion, his professional composure finally cracking. We won. Against all odds, we actually won. Lisa couldn't process it. The words bounced off the surface of her understanding without penetrating. 1. Rightful owner. Legal possession. Maya hugged her tightly, tears soaking through Lisa's shirt. Does this mean we're safe now, Mom? Does this mean we can stop being scared? Lisa wanted to say yes, wanted to promise that the danger had passed. But she'd seen the Ashfords' faces as the ruling was read, the cold fury in their expressions. This battle might be over, but the war would continue through appeals and legal maneuvers and possibly worse. We're safer than we were, she said carefully. But we still need to be careful. The security threats intensified after the ruling. Someone sent a package to Lisa's hotel containing a dead rat and a note. Thieves don't get to enjoy stolen money. Another threatening call described in detail where Maya would be walking home from school, what she'd be wearing, how easy it would be to grab her. Detective Rodriguez increased police patrols around their locations, but her assessment was grim. These people are sophisticated. They know how to threaten without crossing lines that would allow us to make arrests. My advice remains the same. Hire the best security you can afford and consider relocating somewhere less predictable. Robert began the process of liquidating the diamonds through discreet private sales. Even with the legal ruling in their favor, flooding the market with $270 million in gems would crash prices and attract exactly the wrong kind of attention. Instead, he worked with auction houses and private collectors, selling pieces individually over months. The first diamond sold for $47 million, one of the vivid blue stones that Dr. Chen had identified as exceptional. The money hit Lisa's account as a number so large her brain refused to process it as real. $47 million. More than she would have earned in 10 lifetimes of working 3 jobs. She sat staring at the bank app on her phone, watching the balance like it might disappear as she looked away. Maya found her like that, transfixed by numbers that represented security beyond anything she'd ever imagined. Mom, are you okay? I don't know what I am. Lisa's voice came out hollow. This money should feel good, should feel like winning, but just feels terrifying. Why terrifying? Because I don't know how to be the person who has this. I know how to survive poverty. I know how to work 3 jobs and sleep in cars and make $1 stretch across a week. But this? I have no idea who I'm supposed to become. Maybe you don't become someone different, Maya suggested with the wisdom children sometimes accessed. Maybe you just become yourself without being scared all the time. The statement was so simple, so perfect, that Lisa started crying. Her daughter held her while she sobbed out 15 years of accumulated exhaustion, terror, and rage at a system designed to grind people into dust. When the tears finally stopped, Lisa felt lighter somehow. Not healed, but fractionally closer to believing she might eventually deserve the safety this money promised. Robert called the next morning with news about the Ashford family's appeal. It's been denied. Judge Chen's ruling stands. The diamonds are legally yours, and the Ashfords have no further recourse through the courts. So it's over. The legal battle is over. But I'd recommend maintaining security for at least another 6 months. People motivated by this much money don't always respect legal rulings. Lisa hung up and stared at the mirror frame, which she'd kept despite it being empty and broken. The frame had saved them, had held a fortune disguised as garbage, had been the vehicle through which Aunt Teresa reached across death to transform everything. Maya noticed her mother's attention and came to stand beside her. Are you going to fix it? Get new glass, restore the gilding? I think I want to keep it exactly as it is. A reminder that value isn't always obvious, that beautiful things can hide inside broken packages, that appearance and worth are completely different calculations. That's very philosophical, Mom. I'm growing, Lisa said with a small smile. Becoming myself without being scared all the time. The process of selling the remaining diamonds stretched across 8 months. Each sale brought another cascade of money into accounts Lisa struggled to comprehend managing. Robert connected her with financial advisors who specialized in sudden wealth, helping her navigate taxes, investments, trust structures designed to protect assets across generations. The final accounting showed total proceeds of $287 million after taxes and fees. $287 million. More money than Lisa could spend across multiple lifetimes. More than enough to ensure Maya never experienced poverty, never had to choose between food and medicine, never had to make her dreams smaller to fit her circumstances. But with the money came responsibility that terrified Lisa more than any amount of debt collection calls. How did she use this gift honorably? How did she avoid becoming the kind of person she'd always resented? Wealthy, disconnected, unable to remember what struggle felt like. Aunt Teresa's letter provided guidance Lisa returned to repeatedly, searching for wisdom in her aunt's careful words. Eleanor Ashford had been murdered for wealth she'd never had the chance to enjoy. Teresa had protected that wealth for 60 years, living in poverty to keep it safe. Now Lisa held the result of both women's sacrifices, and simply spending it on luxury felt like betrayal. She established the Eleanor Ashford Foundation 6 months after the final diamond sale, dedicating it to causes Eleanor had supported: women's shelters, arts education, medical debt forgiveness. The Foundation's mission statement acknowledged Eleanor's murder and honored her memory, while working to help people currently suffering. The first grant forgave $5 million in medical debt for families in situations similar to what Lisa had faced. Tens of thousands of people woke to find their impossible burdens erased, their credit restored, their lives given unexpected second chances. Lisa attended one of the notification events, watching a single mother break down crying when told her son's cancer treatment debt no longer existed. The woman grabbed Lisa's hands with desperate gratitude, thanking her over and over for a miracle she couldn't believe was real. This is what Aunt Teresa wanted, Lisa realized. Not just to pass on money, but to use it the way Eleanor would have, helping people who needed it most, creating the kind of world where medical emergencies didn't destroy families financially. The second major initiative funded housing for families facing eviction. Lisa knew intimately the terror of that moment when everything collapsed, when you had to pack your life in garbage bags and drive away from stability. The Foundation's emergency housing program gave families temporary shelter and the time to rebuild without the catastrophic disruption of homelessness. Maya became involved in the Foundation's youth programs, creating initiatives that helped kids whose parents were working multiple jobs. After-school tutoring, summer enrichment, scholarship programs designed to help exceptional students whose potential was being crushed by poverty. On Maya's 11th birthday, they visited Eleanor Ashford's grave for the first time. The headstone was simple, elegant, maintained by a cemetery trust, but rarely visited. Lisa placed roses on the grave, the same flower carved into the mirror frame that had held Eleanor's fortune. "Thank you," Lisa said quietly, "for trusting Aunt Teresa, for making choices that eventually saved us. I promise to honor your memory by helping other people the way you helped us, even though you never knew we existed." Maya added her own message. "I'm going to study math and maybe become a teacher. I want to help kids like me who are smart but poor. I want to show them that circumstances don't define potential." They stood together in silence while late afternoon sun filtered through trees, connecting past to present to future through gratitude and responsibility and the complicated legacy of wealth built on tragedy. The threats finally stopped around the 1-year anniversary of the court ruling. Whether the Ashfords had given up or simply recognized that continued harassment would accomplish nothing, Lisa didn't know. She maintained security for another 6 months before finally cautiously, beginning to live without bodyguards shadowing every movement. The transition to normal life proved harder than Lisa had anticipated. She'd spent 15 years in survival mode. Every decision calculated against scarcity, every choice constrained by what she couldn't afford. Having unlimited resources created a strange paralysis. If she could have anything, how did she know what she actually wanted? Therapy helped. So did surrounding herself with people who'd known her before the money, who could remind her that wealth hadn't changed who she was fundamentally. Robert remained a trusted advisor, guiding her through complex financial decisions. Dr. Chen helped evaluate potential art and historical artifact acquisitions for the foundation. Detective Rodriguez became an unlikely friend, occasionally checking in to ensure Lisa and Maya were genuinely safe. And Maya thrived. She attended an excellent school without worrying about tuition, participated in the advanced math program she'd always deserved access to, developed into the kind of confident, compassionate young person that made Lisa's chest ache with pride. On the second anniversary of finding the diamonds, Lisa took Maya back to Philadelphia, driving past their old apartment building. New tenants occupied the unit they'd been evicted from. The street looked the same, familiar in ways that made Lisa's stomach hurt with remembered fear. "How do you feel being back here?" Maya asked. "Grateful that we survived. Sad that so many people are still living the way we did, one emergency away from catastrophe. Determined to help as many of them as possible." They drove to the cemetery where Aunt Teresa was buried, placing flowers on a grave that now had a proper headstone. Lisa had paid for that within weeks of receiving the first diamond sale proceeds. The inscription read, Teresa Morrison Chen, 1934 to 2023. Seamstress, protector of precious things, beloved aunt. She knew that love transcends time and that courage sometimes looks like quiet endurance. Aunt Teresa, Lisa said softly, "I understand now why you did everything the way you did. You were protecting not just the diamonds, but the story they represented. Eleanor's story, your story, and eventually my story. You gave me more than money. You gave me proof that even when everything seems broken, there can still be extraordinary value hidden inside the damage." Maya added, "Great Aunt Teresa, I never got to meet you, but I'm grateful every day that you were brave enough to keep those diamonds safe. Because of you, Mom and I get to help other people. We get to be part of something bigger than just ourselves." The wind rustled through nearby trees, carrying the scent of late summer flowers. Lisa thought about Eleanor, murdered for wealth she never got to enjoy. About Teresa, living in poverty while sitting on a fortune she couldn't safely access. About all the women across history who'd been invisible, discounted, their labor and loyalty dismissed as insignificant. The broken mirror frame sat in Lisa's office now, mounted on the wall above her desk. She'd had it professionally preserved, stabilizing the damaged wood without repairing it, maintaining the cracks and missing gilding as evidence of everything it had survived. Every time she looked at it, Lisa remembered that value comes in unexpected forms, that protection sometimes requires sacrifice, and that the most precious inheritances aren't always the ones that glitter. 3 years after the court ruling, Lisa stood in the lobby of the newly opened Eleanor Ashford Memorial Center, watching hundreds of people stream through doors that represented everything her aunt and Eleanor had hoped to create. The building occupied a former textile factory in Brooklyn, the same neighborhood where Teresa had worked for decades as a seamstress, now transformed into a comprehensive resource center for working families. The architecture preserved the factory's industrial bones while creating spaces that felt warm and welcoming. Natural light flooded through restored windows. The walls displayed photographs of Eleanor in her prime, Teresa at work in various settings, and most prominently, the mirror frame itself, mounted in a climate-controlled case with a plaque explaining its significance. Maya, now 13 and several inches taller, stood beside her mother greeting visitors. She'd helped design the center's youth programs, bringing insight from someone who'd experienced poverty's particular cruelties firsthand. The Math Tutor Initiative was her idea, as was the scholarship fund specifically for children whose parents worked multiple jobs. "Mom, Ms. Rodriguez is here with her family." Lisa turned to see Detective Patricia Rodriguez approaching with her teenage daughter and elderly mother. The detective had become a genuine friend over the years, someone who understood the journey from crisis to stability because she'd witnessed it from the beginning. Patricia hugged Lisa warmly. "This is incredible. You've created something that will change thousands of lives. We created it. You protected us when we were most vulnerable. This center exists because people like you showed up when it mattered." The center offered services Lisa had desperately needed 3 years ago: emergency financial assistance, medical debt forgiveness consultation, job training, childcare, legal aid. Everything coordinated under one roof, designed by people who understood that poverty wasn't a moral failure, but a systemic trap requiring comprehensive solutions. The dedication ceremony began at 2 in the afternoon, the main hall filled beyond capacity. Lisa had invited specific guests, families the foundation had helped, former co-workers from her janitor and waitress jobs, social workers who'd witnessed the need firsthand. These were the people who mattered, whose lives intersected with the center's mission. Robert Morrison sat in the front row, having become more than just her attorney over the years. He was her trusted advisor, the person who'd believed her when she had nothing to offer except a broken mirror frame and her aunt's cryptic letter. Beside him sat Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd authenticated the diamonds and later joined the foundation's board, helping evaluate historical artifacts for the museum component. The keynote speaker was Professor James Whitfield, an historian who'd written extensively about Eleanor Ashford's murder after the trial revealed new evidence. His research had conclusively demonstrated Richard Ashford's guilt, exposing the inadequate police investigation and the ways wealth had insulated him from consequences. Eleanor Ashford was murdered by her nephew in 1963, the professor began, his voice carrying through the hall with academic authority tempered by genuine emotion. For 60 years, her death was treated as an unfortunate robbery, an unsolved case that gradually faded from public memory. But she deserved better than to be forgotten, and Teresa Morrison understood that. He gestured to the enlarged photograph of Teresa that dominated one wall. Teresa protected Eleanor's diamonds for 6 decades, living in poverty rather than risk exposing them to theft or legal challenge. She understood that someday, these gems could do more than sit in a vault. They could change lives, honor Eleanor's memory, and create the kind of justice that courtrooms sometimes fail to deliver. Lisa listened from backstage, heart pounding with the weight of responsibility these words represented. The professor was right. Teresa had protected more than diamonds. She protected possibility itself, kept it hidden and safe until Lisa was positioned to receive it. When Lisa took the podium, she spoke without notes, words coming from a place where memory and purpose intersected. 3 years ago, I was evicted from my apartment. My daughter and I slept in our car, everything we owned stuffed into garbage bags. I kept a broken mirror frame because it was the last piece of my aunt I had left, even though it seemed worthless to everyone else. She paused, letting the audience absorb the transformation implicit in her standing here now, in a building she'd funded, speaking about creating institutional change. That frame contained $287 million in diamonds. But more importantly, it contained a story about women who were invisible, whose labor and loyalty and courage went unrecognized because society has never valued what it considers service work. Eleanor Ashford was murdered. Her seamstress kept her secrets and protected her legacy. And now we stand in a building dedicated to ensuring that people like Teresa, people like the woman I used to be, receive the support and recognition they deserve. The applause built like waves, hundreds of people acknowledging truth that Lisa had lived in her bones before she could articulate it clearly. Maya joined her mother at the podium, reading from notes she'd prepared with the careful attention she brought to everything. "I'm 13 years old. When I was 10, we were homeless. I did my homework by phone light in a car because we had nowhere else to go. I'm here today because my great-aunt Teresa believed that even when everything seems broken, there can still be value hidden inside the damage. Her voice strengthened, losing the tentative quality that had marked the opening. This center will help kids like I used to be. Kids who are smart and hardworking, but whose potential is being crushed by circumstances they can't control. We're going to give them the same chance I got, the chance to become everything they're capable of being. The audience rose in a standing ovation that continued for several minutes. Lisa held her daughter's hand, both of them crying, both understanding that this moment represented something larger than personal triumph. They were part of a continuum: Eleanor's generosity, Teresa's courage, Lisa's determination, Maya's emerging leadership, women helping women across generations and economic circumstances. After the ceremony, Lisa walked through the center's various departments, seeing programs in action. In the legal aid office, attorneys were helping families fight evictions and negotiate medical debt. In the child care center, parents could leave their children safely while attending job training. In the computer lab, people were learning skills that would qualify them for better-paying positions. One woman approached Lisa hesitantly, a toddler balanced on her hip. "I wanted to thank you. I was 3 weeks from eviction when your foundation paid my back rent. I've been working 2 jobs, but my daughter got sick and I had to miss shifts, and everything just fell apart. Your help gave me time to get back on my feet." Lisa recognized the exhaustion in the woman's eyes, the particular weariness that came from working constantly while still unable to meet basic needs. "What's your name?" "Jessica. Jessica Martinez." "Jessica, I've been exactly where you are. I know what it feels like to work until you're destroyed and still not be able to pay rent. You're not alone anymore, okay? This center exists to make sure people like us don't fall through the cracks." The woman's tears came immediately, and Lisa held her while she sobbed out relief and exhaustion and gratitude. The toddler patted his mother's face with chubby hands, trying to soothe distress he was too young to understand, but old enough to recognize. Moments like this made the entire journey worthwhile. The threats, the legal battles, the constant fear, the struggle to maintain identity while swimming in sudden wealth. If the diamond's only purpose had been making Lisa rich, they would have felt hollow. But this, changing individual lives, creating systemic solutions, building infrastructure that would outlive her, this felt like proper stewardship of Teresa and Eleanor's legacy. The Foundation's first-year report showed staggering impact. $23 million distributed in direct assistance to 15,000 families. Medical debt forgiven for 42,000 people across 5 states. Housing secured for 8,000 individuals facing eviction. Scholarships awarded to 500 students from low-income backgrounds. But the numbers didn't capture the real transformation. The mother who could finally afford her daughter's asthma medication. The father who avoided bankruptcy because emergency car repairs were covered. The teenager who attended college instead of dropping out to work full-time. Lisa established partnerships with hospitals to forgive medical debt systematically, purchasing portfolios of defaulted accounts for pennies on the dollar and simply erasing them. The model proved so effective that other philanthropists began replicating it, creating a movement around medical debt abolition. The housing initiative expanded to include partnerships with developers, creating mixed-income communities where working families could afford apartments in neighborhoods with good schools and services. Lisa remembered too clearly what it felt like to live in places where poverty concentrated, where lack of resources compounded in a lack of opportunity. Maya's math program became the Foundation's flagship youth initiative. She designed it based on her own experience. Tutoring provided by excellent teachers who understood that smart kids existed at every economic level. Supplies and technology included so poverty wasn't a barrier, connections to advanced programs, and competitions that built confidence and credentials. The first cohort included 200 students from Brooklyn, Philadelphia, and Newark. Maya mentored them personally, visiting schools monthly, answering questions via video chat, demonstrating that someone who'd done homework in a car could still excel at mathematics when given proper support. One of her students, a 12-year-old named Marcus from North Philadelphia, reminded Lisa painfully of Maya 3 years ago. Brilliant, hungry to learn, crushed by circumstances beyond his control. His single mother worked overnight shifts at a hospital, leaving Marcus largely unsupervised. The math program gave him structure, challenge, and most importantly, adults who recognized his potential. When Marcus won a regional mathematics competition, defeating students from elite private schools, Maya called Lisa, crying with joy. "Mom, he did it. He came from exactly where we came from, and he beat everyone." This is what the program is supposed to do. I'm so proud of you, baby. You're creating opportunities for kids who might never have had them otherwise. No, Mom, we're creating opportunities. You're the one who turned a broken mirror frame into all of this. The third anniversary of the court ruling arrived on a crisp autumn morning. Lisa had established a tradition of visiting Eleanor's grave on this date, bringing roses and spending time reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Maya came with her, as did Robert Morrison, Dr. Chen, and Detective Rodriguez. They become something like family, people bound not by blood, but by shared experience and mutual respect. "Eleanor," Lisa said quietly, standing before the simple headstone, 3 years ago, I won the right to keep your diamonds. Today, I want to report on what we've done with them. We've helped over 60,000 people directly. We've built a center that will serve your Brooklyn neighborhood for generations. We've created programs that honor your memory while serving people you never met but would have cared about. Maya added her own message. "Eleanor, I never knew you, but you changed my life. Because of choices you made 60 years ago, I got to grow up with opportunities instead of just survival. I'm going to keep paying that forward for as long as I live." They stood in comfortable silence while wind rustled through cemetery trees, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and approaching winter. Lisa thought about how dramatically life could change, how 3 years could contain transformation that felt like lifetimes. Robert spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the emotion he usually kept professionally contained. "I've been a lawyer for 22 years. I've handled hundreds of estate cases, helped wealthy families transfer assets across generations, navigated complex inheritance disputes. But this, helping Lisa claim and use Eleanor's diamonds, this has been the most meaningful work of my career." Dr. Chun agreed. "I've authenticated countless gems, evaluated collections worth billions. But these diamonds mattered in ways that transcended monetary value. They represented courage, loyalty, sacrifice. They connected 3 women across decades in a chain of generosity that continues expanding." Detective Rodriguez, ever practical, added her own perspective. 3 years ago, I responded to threats against a frightened single mother and her daughter. Today, they're transforming systems, creating safety for thousands of people who were exactly as vulnerable as they'd been. That's the kind of justice that actually changes the world. The conversation shifted to future plans as they walked back toward their cars. Lisa had been considering international expansion, bringing the Foundation's model to other countries where working poverty trapped families in cycles that seemed inescapable. The challenge would be adapting programs to different cultural and economic contexts while maintaining the core mission, supporting people who worked hard but still couldn't achieve stability. Robert had been researching legal structures for international operations. Dr. Chun had contacts in museums and universities who could help establish partnerships. But before expanding globally, Lisa wanted to deepen domestic impact. There were still too many American families sleeping in cars, choosing between food and medicine, watching their children's potential crushed by economic circumstances beyond their control. The Foundation's 5-year plan included ambitious goals, helping 250,000 families directly, forgiving $1 billion in medical debt, creating 50 community centers modeled on the Brooklyn facility. The numbers were staggering, but so was the need. Maya had her own vision for the future. At 13, she was already thinking about college, career, the kind of impact she wanted to create independent of her mother's foundation. "I want to be a professor," she told Lisa one evening while they were reviewing scholarship applications together. "I want to teach mathematics at a university, but also work with programs like ours. Show kids from poor backgrounds that they can succeed in academic spaces that usually exclude them. You'll be incredible at that, baby. You already are. Do you think Great Aunt Teresa imagined this when she hid those diamonds?" that we'd end up helping so many people? Lisa considered the question carefully. I think she imagined possibility. She couldn't have predicted specifics, but she understood that resources used wisely could transform more than just one life. She trusted that I'd figure out the right way to honor Eleanor's memory and help people who needed it most. And you did. Maya's voice carried conviction beyond her years. You turned a fortune into a movement. The media attention gradually shifted from the dramatic inheritance story to the Foundation's expanding work. Lisa did fewer interviews now, preferring to let the programs speak for themselves. When reporters called requesting updates, she directed them toward families the Foundation had helped, allowing beneficiaries to share their own stories. But occasionally, she agreed to interviews that seemed valuable for expanding awareness. A profile in the New York Times focused on her journey from sleeping in a car to running a major philanthropic organization. The article captured both the dramatic elements, the hidden diamonds, the legal battle, the threats, and the more mundane reality of learning wealth management, navigating philanthropy, building institutional infrastructure. The journalist, a woman named Sarah Mitchell. The coincidence of sharing Aunt Teresa's old first name wasn't lost on Lisa, asked perceptive questions that cut through surface narratives. 3 years ago, you had nothing. Today, you control a fortune and run a foundation helping thousands of people. How has wealth changed who you are fundamentally? Lisa thought carefully before responding. I'm still the person who worked 3 jobs and couldn't afford rent. That experience lives in my bones. But wealth has given me the safety to be generous in ways poverty made impossible. When you're drowning, you can't pull other people from the water. Now I can. Do you ever feel guilty about having so much when others still struggle? Every day. But guilt without action is useless. I try to channel that discomfort into motivation, to help more people, create better systems, use resources in ways that actually change circumstances rather than just making me feel better about inequality. What would you say to other people who come into sudden wealth, lottery winners, inheritance recipients, anyone who experiences dramatic financial transformation? Remember who you were before the money. Remember what struggle felt like. Use resources to solve problems you understand intimately because you've lived them. And don't let wealth isolate you from the reality most people experience. Stay connected to the world you came from, even as you build something new. The article published with photographs Lisa had carefully vetted. Her working at the Foundation office, Maya tutoring younger students, the Memorial Center bustling with families receiving services. No mansion, no luxury cars, none of the conspicuous consumption that often accompanied sudden wealth. Just evidence of resources used purposefully. The Foundation attracted other donors who'd experienced similar journeys. People who'd grown up poor, achieved success, and wanted to help others escape poverty's particular traps. Lisa established a donor network focused on sharing strategies, coordinating efforts, maximizing impact through collaboration rather than competition. One donor, a tech entrepreneur named David Chen, no relation to Dr. Sarah Chen or Lisa, had built a billion-dollar company after growing up in foster care. His contribution of $50 million allowed the Foundation to expand into foster youth programs, addressing gaps he'd experienced firsthand. Another donor, Patricia Williams, had survived homelessness before becoming a successful attorney. Her focus was housing stability, and her $30 million gift funded permanent supportive housing complexes in 3 cities. Lisa understood that the diamonds had given her access to spaces where she could now recruit others to the work. Wealth created entry to networks of wealthy people, and she used that access strategically to channel resources toward addressing systemic problems. The 5th anniversary of discovering the diamonds and the 3rd anniversary of the court ruling brought renewed media attention. News outlets wanted retrospectives, updates on the woman who'd found a fortune in a broken mirror frame and used it to help thousands of families. Lisa agreed to a televised interview on 60 Minutes, returning to the program that had first broadcast her story during the legal battle. The same journalist, David Morrison, interviewed her in the Brooklyn Memorial Center, their conversation covering everything from the initial discovery to current operations. When you found those diamonds 3 years ago, Did you imagine this? David gestured to the bustling center around them. Honestly, no. I imagined paying my bills, keeping a roof over Maya's head, maybe sleeping without constant fear. This, creating systemic change, helping thousands of families, this seemed impossible for someone like me. Why impossible? Because people like me, poor, working multiple jobs, barely educated, we're not supposed to build institutions. We're supposed to survive and be grateful for whatever scraps we get. The idea that I could use Eleanor's diamonds to create something that outlives me, that changes systems instead of just individual circumstances, that felt like dreaming too large. But you did anyway. I had help. Lisa gestured to where Robert, Dr. Chen, and Detective Rodriguez were visible working with families. These people believed in me when I had no reason to believe in myself. They protected me when I was vulnerable. They taught me how to navigate wealth without losing sight of why it mattered. I didn't do this alone. The interview concluded with Lisa showing David the preserved mirror frame, explaining its significance as both historical artifact and personal symbol. This frame was broken, worthless to most people, but contained extraordinary value for anyone willing to look carefully. That's true for people too. Society discards working poor folks like we're worthless, but we're not. We're just not given opportunities to show what we're capable of becoming. David's final question cut to the heart of everything. If you could talk to Eleanor Ashford and your Aunt Teresa now, what would you say? Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but she kept her voice steady. I'd tell Eleanor that her diamonds did more good than she could have imagined. I'd thank Teresa for being brave enough to protect them, and wise enough to understand that someday they could change more than just one life. And I'd promise them both that I'll keep using these resources the way they would have wanted, to help people society overlooks, to honor invisible labor, to create justice where systems have failed. The segment aired during prime time, reaching millions of viewers. The Foundation's donation page crashed from traffic within the first hour. Emails poured in from people wanting to help, wanting to replicate the model in their communities, wanting to share their own stories of struggle and survival. Maya, now 15 and applying to specialized high schools, handled much of the correspondence. She'd become an eloquent advocate for the Foundation's mission, comfortable speaking to media, donors, and beneficiaries with equal authenticity. Mom, we got an email from a woman in Chicago who wants to establish a similar center there. She's offering $10 million if we'll help her develop programs. Lisa reviewed the email with a practice she developed for evaluating opportunities. The donor seemed legitimate, motivated by personal experience rather than seeking publicity. Set up a call with her next week. If she's serious, we can share our operational model and support her launch. The Foundation had become what Lisa had never imagined creating. A sustainable institution that would continue serving families long after she was gone. The endowment had grown to $150 million through careful investment and additional donations. Annual operating budget exceeded $40 million. Staff had grown from just Lisa to over 200 people across multiple sites. But Lisa made sure they never lost sight of the mission. Every staff member spent time working directly with families, understanding viscerally who they served and why it mattered. No corporate distance, no bureaucratic insulation from the reality of poverty. She'd learned from observing other philanthropies that good intentions could calcify into inefficiency when organizations became more focused on self-preservation than impact. The Foundation structure deliberately included beneficiaries in governance. People who'd received services sat on advisory boards, shaped programs, held staff accountable. One board member, Jessica Martinez, the woman Lisa had met at the Memorial Center's opening, brought insight from her continued journey out of poverty. 3 years after nearly being evicted, she'd completed training as a medical assistant, secured stable employment with benefits, and moved into subsidized housing where her daughter thrived. During board meetings, Jessica's voice carried weight precisely because she'd experienced the services they provided. When staff proposed programs that sounded good in theory but wouldn't work in practice, she identified problems others missed. We can't require families to attend financial literacy classes before receiving emergency assistance, She'd argued when the policy was suggested. When you're about to be evicted, you don't need lectures about budgeting. You need immediate help, and then support once the crisis is stable. Making people jump through hoops to prove they deserve help is exactly the kind of degrading requirement that makes poverty even more exhausting. The policy was scrapped, and the Foundation's approach remained focused on dignity, treating people as capable adults who needed resources rather than moral instruction. Maya's high school years continued the trajectory she'd begun at 10. Exceptional academic performance, leadership in math programs, growing commitment to educational equity. She was accepted to Stuyvesant High School, one of New York's most competitive public schools, where she thrived despite being surrounded by students from wealthier backgrounds. The experience gave her additional insight into educational inequality. Her classmates had private tutors, test prep courses, summer enrichment opportunities that cost thousands of dollars. The school assumed resources that Maya scholarship students couldn't access, creating subtle barriers that filtered who could succeed. She brought these observations to the Foundation's education team, shaping programs that addressed the hidden costs of attending elite schools, providing not just tuition support, but comprehensive wraparound services, tutoring, supplies, transportation, college counseling, networking opportunities that wealthy families took for granted. The program expanded to support 2,000 students annually across 5 cities. Early results showed remarkable outcomes. 87% of participants graduating high school on time, compared to 65% of economically similar peers not in the program. College enrollment rates approached 75%, with nearly half attending selective institutions. Maya became the program's most visible advocate, speaking at education conferences and policy forums about what worked and why. At 16, she testified before the New York City Council about education funding, arguing passionately for increased support for students from working-poor families. You can't expect kids to compete academically when they're worried about whether there will be dinner tonight, when they're doing homework by phone light because the electricity got shut off, when they're missing school to help siblings because their parents are working multiple jobs. Poverty creates educational deficits that talent and determination alone can't overcome. We need systemic support, not just individual bootstrap narratives. The speech went viral, generating national conversation about educational equity. Maya was invited to conferences, featured in education publications, recognized as an emerging voice in youth advocacy. Lisa watched her daughter's leadership develop with awe and pride, seeing Maya become exactly the kind of person she'd hoped: compassionate, articulate, committed to justice. As the Foundation approached its 5th anniversary, Lisa commissioned an independent evaluation of impact. She wanted rigorous assessment beyond the numbers they tracked internally, external validation that their work actually changed outcomes rather than just distributing resources. The evaluation team spent 6 months analyzing data, interviewing beneficiaries, comparing outcomes to control groups who hadn't received services. Their report arrived in a thick binder that Lisa reviewed with Robert, Dr. Chen, and key Foundation staff. The findings exceeded their hopes. Families who received emergency assistance were significantly less likely to experience homelessness, more likely to maintain stable employment, showed better health outcomes. Children in supported families demonstrated improved academic performance, fewer behavioral issues, higher educational aspirations. The medical debt forgiveness program had prevented approximately 8,000 bankruptcies, preserving credit scores and financial stability for families who would otherwise have been destroyed by medical bills. The Housing Stabilization Initiative reduced evictions by 73% among participants, keeping families in communities where they'd established support networks and children could stay in consistent schools. Most significantly, the evaluation found intergenerational effects. Children whose families received support showed trajectory changes that would likely affect their entire lives: better education, stronger social-emotional development, expanded sense of possibility. We're not just solving immediate crises, the lead evaluator explained during a presentation to the board. You're changing developmental trajectories. These kids will grow up with different opportunities than they would have had, and many will break cycles of poverty that might otherwise have continued across generations. Lisa felt emotion threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. This was exactly what Aunt Teresa had hoped for, what Eleanor's diamonds were meant to create. Not just wealth transfer, but transformation that rippled outward through families and communities. The Foundation's 10th anniversary gala took place in the Brooklyn Memorial Center's main hall, transformed for the evening into elegant event space while maintaining the industrial aesthetic Lisa loved. 600 guests gathered, donors, staff, beneficiaries, community leaders, journalists documenting the milestone. Lisa wore a simple dress, expensive but understated, having learned over the years that wealth displayed too ostentatiously created distance from mission. Maya, now 18 and preparing to start college at MIT on a full scholarship she'd earned through academic excellence, wore her mother's style, comfortable elegance without excess. The program included remarks from families the Foundation had helped, their stories illustrating impact better than any statistics could. A single father described how emergency assistance had kept him housed after losing his job. A mother talked about medical debt forgiveness, allowing her to finally sleep without constant panic attacks. A teenager explained how tutoring support had gotten him into college despite attending underfunded schools. When Lisa took the podium, she spoke about journeys. Eleanor's from wealth to murder, Teresa's from seamstress to guardian of fortune, her own from sleeping in a car to running a major philanthropy. 10 years ago, I kept a broken mirror frame because it was all I had left of my aunt. 5 years ago, I discovered that frame contained diamonds worth hundreds of millions. Today, those diamonds have transformed lives in ways that Eleanor and Teresa hoped for but couldn't have fully imagined. She gestured to the preserved frame displayed prominently in its case. This frame represents everything the Foundation stands for. It appeared worthless, broken, ready to be discarded, but it contained extraordinary value for anyone willing to look carefully. People are like that too, especially people society marginalizes, overlooks, dismisses as having nothing to offer. Working poor families, single parents, people ground down by systems that punish illness and scarcity. These aren't people without value. They're people without resources, without safety nets, without the kind of support that makes thriving possible. Our work is about providing those resources while maintaining dignity, creating systems that recognize inherent worth rather than demanding people prove they deserve help. The applause was warm and sustained, but Lisa wasn't finished. She had one more announcement, something she and Maya had discussed but kept private until now. Tonight, I'm announcing the Eleanor Ashford Endowment, a perpetual fund that will ensure this foundation continues serving families forever. Maya and I are contributing $100 million to this endowment, guaranteeing that even after we're gone, this work continues. The room erupted. $100 million represented more than a third of the remaining diamond proceeds. It was a commitment not just of money, but of philosophy. Wealth meant nothing if it didn't serve purposes larger than individual comfort. Maya joined her mother at the podium, speaking with the confidence she'd developed through years of advocacy. My mom and I have more money than we'll ever need. Keeping it all would be morally obscene when so many people struggle the way we used to. This endowment ensures that Eleanor's diamonds keep changing lives for generations. After the gala ended and guests departed, Lisa walked through the empty hall with Maya, both of them exhausted but satisfied. They stopped before the mirror frame, studying the ornate carving that had saved them. Do you ever wish Aunt Teresa had told you about the diamonds while she was alive? Maya asked, so you could have thanked her, told her what they meant? Sometimes, but I think she knew. She understood that the diamonds' real value wasn't the money. It was the possibility they represented. She trusted that I'd figure out the right way to use them, and she was right. What do you think she'd say if she could see all this? Lisa smiled, imagining her aunt's practical wisdom. She'd probably tell me to stop admiring what I've built and get back to work. There's always more to do, more people to help, more systems to change. Sounds like something you'd say, Mom. I learned from the best. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two survivors who become builders, two women connected to a chain of generosity stretching back through Teresa, to Eleanor and forward through all the families they'd helped and would continue helping. The mirror frame gleamed in the security lighting, its damaged beauty preserved as testimony that brokenness and value could coexist, that appearance and worth operated on completely different scales, that the most precious inheritances often came disguised as garbage. Lisa's phone buzzed with an email from the Foundation's medical debt program. Another portfolio acquired, another $8 million in crushing debt simply erased for thousands of families who would wake tomorrow to find their impossible burdens had vanished. She showed Maya the notification, both of them understanding viscerally what this meant. People who could finally sleep without panic attacks, who could afford groceries instead of sending every spare dollar to collectors, who could begin imagining futures unconstrained by debt that accumulated through illness rather than irresponsibility. This is why Eleanor died protecting those diamonds, Maya said softly. Not because she cared about gems, but because she understood they could eventually do this, change systems, transform lives, create justice where institutions failed. Lisa wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, feeling the solid warmth of her. The reality of this brilliant young woman who'd grown from a frightened 10-year-old doing homework by phone light into someone who would carry this work forward into her own generation. The journey wasn't finished. Poverty persisted. Systems remained broken. Too many families still struggled the way Lisa and Maya once had. But every day, the Foundation created small transformations that accumulated into something larger. Proof that resources used wisely could bend circumstances toward justice. As they locked up the Memorial Center and walked toward their car, a practical sedan, not the luxury vehicle wealth could have bought, Lisa thought about all the invisible women throughout history. Seamstresses and housekeepers, janitors and caregivers, people whose labor held society together while remaining essentially unrecognized. Aunt Teresa had been one of them. Eleanor, despite her wealth, had understood their value. And now Lisa carried their legacy forward, ensuring that invisible labor became visible, that women dismissed as service workers received the honor and support they deserved. The broken mirror frame had held more than diamonds. It had held stories about courage and loyalty, about women who protected each other across generations and economic circumstances, about the difference between value and price. Lisa had learned that lesson deeply, that she was worth everything even when she had nothing, that Maya's potential existed independent of their poverty, that dignity wasn't something money could buy or poverty could erase. Those truths lived in her bones now, foundational beliefs that guided every decision. As they drove through Brooklyn toward home, Maya fell asleep against the window, exhausted from the gala. Lisa glanced at her daughter and felt gratitude so profound it bordered on pain. Gratitude for Aunt Teresa's courage, for Eleanor's trust, for every person who'd helped them survive and eventually thrive. The diamonds had transformed their circumstances, yes, but more fundamentally, they'd revealed what had always been true, that Lisa and Maya mattered, that their struggles and strengths and dreams had value regardless of bank balances, that they deserved not just survival, but genuine flourishing. And now, through the Foundation, they helped other families discover the same truths about themselves. Helped people see that their poverty reflected systemic failures rather than personal inadequacy, that their dreams deserved resources to become real, that they were worth investing in not because they might produce profitable returns, but because human dignity demanded nothing less. The broken mirror frame had shown Lisa her own worth by containing treasure disguised as trash. Now she spent every day helping others see past surfaces to the value beneath, creating systems that honored inherent dignity instead of demanding people prove they deserve basic security. It was work that would never be finished, problems that resisted easy solutions, systemic inequities that required sustained commitment to address. But Lisa had learned from sleeping in cars and working 3 jobs that endurance was its own kind of power, that showing up day after day, even when you were exhausted, could eventually create transformation. She was showing up for Eleanor, for Teresa, for Maya, for Jessica Martinez and Marcus, and all the families whose names she'd never know, but whose lives intersected with the Foundation's work. Showing up for the woman she'd been 3 years ago, terrified and exhausted, keeping a broken frame because it was all she had left. That woman deserved everything this work created. And so did the thousands of people still living in cars, still choosing between medicine and food, still struggling against systems designed to grind them into dust. The diamonds had given Lisa resources to fight those systems. But the real treasure had always been the evidence that people like her, overlooked, dismissed, ground down by circumstances beyond their control, contained extraordinary value waiting to be recognized and supported. That was the lesson of the mirror frame. That was Eleanor's legacy and Teresa's gift. And that was what Lisa would spend the rest of her life honoring. The inherent worth of every person struggling to survive. The revolutionary idea that everyone deserved safety and dignity regardless of what they could produce or afford. The work continued. The mission endured. And somewhere, Lisa liked to imagine, Eleanor and Teresa watched with satisfaction, knowing their courage and sacrifice had created ripples that would continue expanding long after everyone in this story had become history themselves. The broken mirror frame stood as testament that damage and value could coexist, that treasures could hide in plain sight, that women who seemed powerless could change the world when given resources and room to work. Lisa drove through Brooklyn's late-night streets, her daughter sleeping beside her, heading toward home and tomorrow, and all the families still waiting for help they didn't know was coming. The diamonds were mostly gone now, converted into programs and buildings and endowments that would outlive her. But the story continued, written daily in transformed lives, in prevented evictions and medical debts forgiven, and children given chances they'd never have had otherwise. That story was the real inheritance, not wealth, but commitment to using resources for purposes larger than personal comfort. The mirror frame had begun everything, that damaged piece of craftsmanship that everyone else had dismissed as garbage. Lisa would never forget the moment she discovered what it held, the absolute disbelief that treasure could hide inside something so broken. But she understood now that the frame itself was the real treasure. Physical proof that appearances deceived, that value lived in unexpected places, that paying attention to what others overlooked could reveal extraordinary possibilities. She'd built an entire foundation on that principle. And as she pulled into their driveway, a modest house in a safe neighborhood, comfortable without being excessive, she felt the satisfaction of knowing she'd honored her aunt's trust, Eleanor's sacrifice, and her own journey from poverty to purpose. The broken mirror frame had saved them, and now they were saving others, one family at a time, building systems that recognize human worth regardless of bank balances. It was enough. It was everything. It was exactly what Eleanor and Teresa had hoped their diamonds might eventually become. Not just wealth, but transformation itself. Possibility made real through courage and commitment and the revolutionary belief that everyone deserved dignity. Lisa carried sleeping Maya inside, put her daughter to bed, then stood for a moment in the doorway watching her breathe with the deep rhythm of secure childhood. This was victory. Not the money or the foundation or the recognition, but this. Maya, sleeping safely, dreams unconstrained by poverty, future open with. Possibilities that 3 years ago had seemed impossibly distant. The mirror frame had given them that. Eleanor's trust, Teresa's courage, and Lisa's determination had created space for Maya to become everything she was capable of being. And tomorrow, they would wake and continue the work, helping more families find their own versions of security and possibility. The story wasn't finished. It had barely begun. But for tonight, Lisa allowed herself satisfaction. They had taken something broken and transformed it into something beautiful. They had honored women who'd been invisible by making their stories matter. They had converted tragedy into justice, theft into restoration, individual fortune into collective possibility. The broken mirror frame stood in the Memorial Center, preserved as evidence of everything they'd survived and built. Damage and value coexisting, brokenness containing treasure, appearance and worth operating on completely different scales. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was the gift that kept giving. The understanding that everyone, regardless of circumstances, contained extraordinary worth waiting to be recognized and supported. Lisa had learned it living in a car. She'd proven it building a foundation. And she would spend every remaining day ensuring others learned it too, that they mattered, that their struggles weren't failures, that they deserved not just survival, but genuine flourishing. The diamonds were gone, converted into programs and buildings and endowments. But their real value persisted in every family helped, every crisis averted, every child given chances poverty would have destroyed. That was enough. That was everything. That was exactly what broken mirror frames could become when protected by courage and transformed by purpose. Not just objects, but vehicles for revolution, instruments for justice, proof that the world could change when people chose to use resources for purposes larger than personal comfort. Lisa smiled in the darkness, feeling Aunt Teresa's presence like a hand on her shoulder, Eleanor's approval like light through damaged glass. They had done it. Against every obstacle, despite every threat, through all the fear and uncertainty, they had built something worthy of the sacrifice that made it possible. The broken mirror frame had held $287 million in diamonds. But more importantly, it had held proof that value could hide in plain sight, that treasures waited in places others dismissed as worthless, that women who seemed powerless could change everything when given resources and room to work. That story would continue long after Lisa was gone. The foundation would persist, serving families across generations, honoring Eleanor and Teresa by helping people they'd never meet but would have recognized as deserving all the support wealth could provide. It was legacy in the truest sense, not just money passing between generations, but values embodied in institutions, principles made real through sustained commitment, the radical idea that everyone deserved dignity regardless of what they could afford or produce. Lisa had received that gift, and she would spend the rest of her life ensuring others received it too. The work continued. The mission endured, and the broken mirror frame stood as eternal testament that appearances deceived, that damage and value coexisted, that the most precious inheritances often came disguised as garbage. She closed Maya's door gently and walked to her own room, exhausted but satisfied. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new families needing help, new opportunities to honor the legacy she'd inherited. But tonight, she could rest in the knowledge that Aunt Teresa's courage and Eleanor's sacrifice had created exactly what they'd hoped for. Not just transformed circumstances for one family, but systemic change that would ripple outward through communities and generations. The broken mirror frame had saved them. And now they were saving others. It was enough. It was everything. It was exactly what treasures hidden in plain sight could become when protected by courage and transformed by purpose. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.